Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Allen, and this is our blog for the week of September 21st. You may notice I'm a little informal right now. That is because I had filmed all this morning and I had to take my son to a cross country practice, and I am now back. But I wanted to go ahead and get this filmed. And since I'm just in a small little screen and this one's a little more informal, I figured you could live with it if I could live with it. So, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get into the resources that I wanted to share this week. One thing about this week's resources actually are local museums and some far off museums that I thought had some pretty cool materials that might be of benefit to you in the future with your teaching. When you do your blogs, you can comment if you think you would use any of these particular resources that are posted or that I'm going to show you. I will put all the links up on Sakai for the week. But if you are familiar with other sites or resources on a museum or a national park or something that you would like to comment on and said, the ones you provided are nice, I really would think about maybe using this instead. That's no problem. Again, this is just an activity to kind of get more tools in your toolbox and places to go in case you're trying to think of lesson ideas and things like that. That was something I struggled with way back in the turn of the millennium. Sometimes just adding things and knowing where to make them. And the other thing to remember, you don't have to follow these lesson plans to a T. There's a saying, good teachers steal, or some people like to say good teachers borrow. I never gave anything back once I started using it though. You just adapt these lessons to the way that they can work in your classroom or for you. And with all that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and start showing you some. So here's some museums. The very first thing actually is not, it's kind of sort of a museum, but I wanted to show it to you because it's kind of important, especially for those of you that are going to be teaching in West Virginia. This is West Virginia's eCyclopedia. I know I've talked to a few of you about Golden Horseshoe and the History Bowl that West Virginia likes to take part in. Actually, we're going to do something on some local activities and national activities that you can take part of. So I'm not going to go down that road with those things just yet. But I just wanted to say, if you're familiar with the Golden Horseshoe or History Bowl and 8th grade teaching standards, you might want to check out the West Virginia Encyclopedia. I believe it is actually run by the state of West Virginia, or at least they have a heavy influence on what's on here. And if you look, I'm going to move my face out of here so you can see. You can pretty much look up anything in West Virginia that's in its history. Like, for example, if you looked up Martinsburg, I live in Martinsburg, so let's just look it up. Boom, there's tons of Martinsburg topics you can click on and it'll tell you. It's like a Wikipedia for West Virginia. That's really neither here nor there. The thing I wanted to show you, one thing about West Virginia history, especially when people start teaching it, West Virginia is a small state, so there's not always a whole lot of resources on some of the topics in West Virginia, especially later. When you first start off, you're kind of dealing with a lot of Virginia history too, so you usually can find some things. But here, if you look, there's something called Classroom. There are a lot of different lesson plans that are here. And if you look, Explorers of West Virginia, boom. There's lesson plans there. If you look, Music of West Virginia, boom. There's Music by Mountaineers. And actually, I would look, here you go. And you can click right there. There's a whole bunch of lesson plans for West Virginia. That is on the West Virginia eNcyclopedia. This is one right here. You can see it. This is the heart of a lot of things. Local, John Brown. But if you look there, 2 constitutions, that's something we used to spend a lot of time on in 8th grade. If you're an 8th grade West Virginian, you may know a little bit about this. Hopefully you do. And our 2 constitutions and the way that things kind of hammered out later, and what constitutions we operate under. But again, West Virginia eCyclopedia, tons of lesson plans, as you can see, on the state of West Virginia. I would check it out. Another thing, and when you get your placements, you may get placed in an 8th grade classroom. Everyone I had last semester for student teaching was in an 8th grade classroom at least one time, either in the first part or in the second part. I don't know if it was planned, it just kind of happened. And a few of them were like, whoa, I don't have a lot for West Virginia. This was a site that I kind of referred them to that they might be able to find some stuff. West Virginia eNcyclopedia. Again, the link will be up. The next place I want to show you, local one, but I think it has a lot. And if you've already watched the unit plan video that I made earlier today, you may notice that I talk a little bit about the inquiry approach and using documents and things like that. Please don't forget that we live near Washington, D.C., which has so many awesome resources. Of course, you may end up doing some field trips and all down there. But the Library of Congress actually has a lot of materials and lesson plans for students. And I will send this link to you. But this is, classroom materials at the Library of Congress. If you look, they've got them all divvied up. They have a lot of World War I stuff too. I might send that link when we get in there. But as you see, there you go. There's a lesson plans galore in here. It's got some student-oriented stuff, teacher-oriented stuff. And if you look, let's see if we can go back. Let's go back. I'm being a little lazy and just not clicking that. Those are all, but that's not everything. As you can see, it goes on. So Library of Congress, check it out. I'm going right down the line here. National Holocaust Museum, another DC museum. You can do a lot with language arts and such with this also, and integrate lessons and all. And I'm actually going to come back to these last two that I just showed you, mainly because we're going to do one of these blogs on professional development once you're a little more established in the classroom and you're ready to go back and actually, I hate to say learn, but things are slowing down for you. But we'll come back to that later. As far as teaching materials, National Holocaust Museum has a lot of things related to World War II, the Holocaust. Again, going back to the unit plans that I was talking about today, one of the objectives that you have to do is an attitudinal objective, like things about empathy and changing point of views, or at least considering other point of views. A lot of that's in there. Look at that, anti-Semitism and racism lesson plans. Tons of things at the National Holocaust Museum you may want to consider taking a look at. Books and literature, Elie Wiesel, a lot of materials. A lot of schools read in ninth grade. You might be able to do some integrated lessons depending on what you're teaching. Let's see, I'll just click on that. And you can download all the materials as a PDF. The Holocaust Museum stuff, I just did a session there. I actually did a fellowship type thing there this past summer, and they have so many awesome things. I'm going to share a little more on that on another blog as far as, like I say, with professional development. But for this one, with unit plans and teaching topics, they got a lot. I would check it out. The Smithsonian, this is not a knock on the Smithsonian. I love the Smithsonian, go there. I think sometimes their learning materials aren't quite as awesome as some of the other places. And what I mean by that, they're a little more complicated to find. There are things though, if you fish around the Smithsonian, and images and workshops and curriculum that you can use. And as you see, there's a whole bunch here. So you might want to check that out. Different museums. By the way, I don't know if anyone's been to the Postal Museum. It's a really awesome museum. It sounds weird. I went there. It's right by Union Station. But as you can see, they have some things on their curriculum guides. Let's click it. All the museums have these things. As you can see, there's different things that you can click on. But this isn't saying that their materials are bad. They're just sometimes, I think, a little harder to find. There you go. There's classroom resources down there. So let's see, activities that you can do and such. Virtual exhibits. Another one that I wanted to do. This is the British Library. I threw this one on here. Forgive me. My wife and I watch a lot of British television. We like a lot of the English culture. I've been to London. It's awesome. If you ever get a chance, go. If you have been, you probably know. But the British Library actually has a ton of things and lesson plans related to education and resources, especially if you're doing a Euro class, an AP Euro class in your 10th grade teaching, or even a world history. As you can see, you can just click on these and they get a little more in depth, and they again have a lot of inquiry-based things. I kind of got sidetracked when I was talking about the Library of Congress, but when I did these unit plans, I mentioned inquiry-based topics, tons of them, as you can see here. Being a Library of Congress or the British Library, everything they're going to have is some sort of inquiry-based thing. It could be a document. It could be a political cartoon. It could be an image. It could be an editorial, all that stuff. So the British Museum, check it out. It's got some pretty cool things. I should have done this after the Holocaust Museum, just because it's on that vein. But I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Shoah Foundation. The Holocaust Museum talks a lot about them. That is actually an organization. It was actually called the Shoah Foundation, and it was founded right after the movie Schindler's List came out. And it recorded a lot of testimonials from survivors of the Holocaust in Europe and even other types of genocides around the world or in history. Well, eventually, once they kind of started to get so many of these, Steven Spielberg actually turned them over, or the foundation, Spielberg was a major part of this, turned them over to the University of Southern California, USC. So they monitor this. They have tons of videos of survivors talking about different situations. You can watch long videos. I don't have my login at the moment, but you can watch long videos. You can watch short videos. Some of them are only clips of a minute or two just to kind of reiterate points. Some are 45 minutes. I would use the clip sometimes. It's pretty heavy stuff, and I taught middle school for a long time. But you can look at them on different aspects. It could be Hungarian Jews who had a march right towards the end of the war and they were being wiped out. You can do the early days. There's stuff on Anne Frank where people talk about maybe seeing her in the camps and such. So it's really interesting. I don't want to use anything that makes it sound overly, positive, because the event isn't positive, but as a teaching tool, it's fantastic. So the Shoah Foundation is another one. And again, that kind of goes hand in hand with the Holocaust. So right now we've looked at eCyclopedia, Documents, the Library of Congress. That's an awesome one. Holocaust Museum, Smithsonian, British Library. Again, I like the British Library. As far as a teacher, the three that I use the most in my classes were British Library, Library of Congress, and I like the eCyclopedia. All of them I would adapt. I wouldn't use them to a T, but I would definitely take things from those lessons. The last one I want to show you, and again, I'll probably talk a little bit about this one with professional development because I did a session there for a week and it was phenomenal, was the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Please don't confuse this with the Smithsonian's American Portrait Gallery. They're two different things. The National Gallery of Art is actually not a Smithsonian Institute museum. When you go down in the mall, though, it is right there. It's among the others. It used to be right across from the museum. Actually, it's still across from the museum. The museum is no longer there. If you've ever been to the museum, you'll know what I'm talking about. It was awesome, but it's now closed. The National Gallery of Art has a lot of lessons, and you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with me? I'm going into social studies. I'm not an art teacher. Well, it gets into that integration, and they do a lot of integrated activities where you might be an English teacher, you might use something, you might be a social studies teacher. Those are the two that they use the most when I went to professional development. But there were some science teachers because they could integrate certain visions or things about the art and research. Again, neither here nor there. But if you go, they have a lot of lesson plans, and you would have to investigate them and read them, but there's things on the American West. One lesson plan that I know a lot of people like, they do the Manifest Destiny one where, you could see the ladies, the angel coming across the American West. That's another way to use your art. There's things on heroes. These are all based on works that they have in this museum. It's awesome. It's actually probably my favorite museum in Washington, D.C. But if you ever get a chance to check it out, do it. But the more important thing is, here's a lot of lesson plans that you might want to check out. A lot of mythology. If you have middle schoolers, my middle schoolers, when we would do ancient Greece, loved mythology. They found it very, very interesting. Might be something that you might want to check out. Myth of Apollo. Even if it's 5, 6, you can adapt stuff. Don't let these things be barometers and things. Just mold it to yourself. As you can see, they have tons of resources here. That's just a few. Again, when you do this, think about some sites that might be interesting to you and you can blog on it. I just want to know, do you think you would use anything? Check these sites out. See if there's any resources that you find interesting. Maybe there's an area that you want to teach. If you want to teach West Virginia history, which a lot of people want to, do you think the eCyclopedia will be a good site for you to use? If you want to teach AP Euro, would the British Library be a good one? If you just want to teach social studies, is there any of these sites that would work? So with all that being said, I try to keep these blogs as short as possible. I can talk all day. Thank you for letting me wear my old hat. It is getting beat up. Thank you for bearing with my ums and ahs, and check out these websites. They will be posted on Sakai. I'm going to stop sharing and tell everyone, good job. I'll talk to you later. Look forward to reading the blogs.